If your wife is doing it all, then you've become a burden, not a husband. One of the biggest misconceptions in a modern Western relationship is that we have a 50-50 partnership in a marriage, that we share the responsibilities equally, that we ultimately pull our weight evenly throughout the entirety of the relationship, and that is what is going to make it work. And there's no coincidence that we find ourselves in a situation where reality says that that is just not the case. Now, fundamentally, the reason that this occurs is nobody taught us as men how to cut the energetic connection from us as a little boy to our mother. We just grow up being this immature child running around doing whatever the fuck we want. And what we've seen happen is, as we have grown up as men and stepped into our adult bodies, is the child inside of us has stayed present. So what does that mean? It means that we look to our wife to behave like our mother. It means that we don't take the responsibility and the radical accountability of bearing the burden and the load on leading the family. We look to our wife to do it. Take the majority of family dynamics right now. The woman looks after the home, she looks after the kids. In many instances, she's still got a job. She's doing all the cooking, the cleaning, she's the house doctor. She's planning and organising all the events, she's taking care of the social calendar. And now take a step back, and as a man, look at your wife and observe her doing all these things. What's the difference between her and your mother when you was a child? If you take away your financial contribution to the family, ask yourself, what the fuck do you bring? What the fuck do you bring to the relationship if it ain't money? And this is why the 50-50 mentality does not work. This is why you have become a burden in your wife's life. I know, because it was me. I had a go-to phrase with my wife, and that was every time she would say that we didn't spend any time together, or she would just like me to not work so much so that we could have some quality time, I would turn to her and say, well, if you wanted to spend time with me that much, why don't you organise something? Why don't you put it in the calendar? Why are you waiting for me to do it? Look at how much of a burden that simple statement is. Look at how much of an impact that makes in adding more stress, more weight, more concern, worry and responsibility to your wife's plate. Nobody told us, right? Let's call the spade the spade. They missed that fucking lesson at high school. They missed the sheer impact that we would have on our wife's emotional state by continuing to behave like a child. So what do? If we look at the sheer energetics behind it, the masculine and the feminine, we look at what it actually means to have that polarity dancing harmoniously in the marriage, we have to start to understand the differences that play out between each of the roles. We have to understand the differences that are required in order for it to be successful. The masculine is the doer. We get shit done, we conquer. And the feminine is the all-being. She is the one that ultimately takes care of the creation, brings about the life, and she does that by leaning into her true essence. And so we have to start to look at what we do and how we behave in order to align in this dynamic. Are we making our wife do more? Because if the answer is yes, then we're keeping her in her masculine. You are forcing your wife to exert herself, which is why she's emotionally exhausted, because she's physically exhausted. And how does this play out? She gets angry, she gets frustrated, she criticizes and she gets on your back all the time. Why? Because she is doing it all. The masculine inside of her is at the forefront. He is leading and taking charge. He is taking control. Inside of her, she cannot relax, she cannot soften, she cannot be in the true essence of her femininity. because she's being forced to do the complete opposite. Humour me, right? What man takes pride in seeing his wife physically and emotionally exhausted? Just take a step back. Look and observe at how your wife shows up in the relationship, at how she shows up day to day. Is she glowing? Is she warm? Is she radiant? Does she look at you with loving eyes? Or is she tired? Is she repeating the same things every single day? Is she responsible for everything because you're not willing to be? What is the dynamic? What is going on? What do you witness? What do you observe? Because where's the integrity in keeping your wife in that state? Where's the honour in pushing your wife to sheer exhaustion every single day? Because you don't feel it's your responsibility, because you don't feel that she pulls her weight enough, because it's a man's role to go out and provide the money and it's the woman's role to do everything else at home. Does that sound like divine masculinity to you? Causing a woman that much stress, pain and concern? These were the questions that I had to ask myself. These are the questions that I had to ultimately face, because this was the reality that I was causing in my relationship. This is the reality that I was bringing about for my wife. This is the reality I had to look in the mirror and start to see. Our wife is a reflection of how we behave. So if your wife is not peaceful, if she's not calm, if she's not able to be all that she truly can be, you're a burden. You're making her life difficult. As men, we walk the plane of this earth to be better, to become stronger, to go on this journey of transcendence, to be all that we can be. And as part of that, we are asking God to make us as strong and powerful and successful as we can. So why do we bitch and moan about the challenges that we face? Why do we get on at our wives? Why do you tear her down when all she wants to do is be herself? She wants to show up in her true, authentic expression. And yet, because you haven't disconnected that attachment to your mother, because you haven't shifted your perspective on what it means to have a wife in your life, and you see her as your caretaker, you see her as somebody who needs to look after you, you now push upon her all of the weight, all of the suffering, all of the concerns, and make her deal with it. You make her bear that load. She has to carry the weight of your world on her shoulders. In my opinion, because you ain't willing to grow up. And I say this because this is the lesson that I had to learn. These are the questions I had to answer to myself, not to anybody else. And this was a realization that I had to come to see how much of a boy I was being in my own marriage. Take a look at your wife. Is she exhausted? Is she tired? Is she emotionally checked out? And if you're answering yes to any of these questions, it's time to look in the fucking mirror. It's time to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing to the woman that you say you love? What are you doing in being a hypocrite in the way that you behave versus the things that you say? Sit with these. And if you truly love your wife, if you truly love her for her authenticity, then let her be herself. Take the load off of her plate. Stop pushing her into her masculine. Allow her to relax. Show her the divine masculine man and leader that you can be. And watch your world and your relationship change drastically.